This was the first time I was writing a post where I knew that it could have a very high potential of, catching on. And I'd say over the next 2 hours, the numbers just kept going up and up. And the trend sort of continued for, I'd say, about 4 to 5 days after that. I think the most delightful comments that I received, this was the first time that they saw a ChatGPT hack that was actually going to help them, in a very tangible manner.
Hi Nivedha.
Hi, Dhanyal.
Welcome to the podcast. As we were discussing, right? So what I found interesting is that your LinkedIn post and which actually went viral, and you also wrote about that to everyone who's listening and watching. So Nivedha recently did a post which is on using ChatGPT in terms of how you can use it to make your resumes better, and that post actually got 3000 plus engagements and close to 200 comments. So we will be covering how it went viral, and we'll talk about the whole experience with Nivedha here, and a quick intro of Nivedha before we jump into this. So Nivedha is a colleague with me at SaaSBoomi, and she takes care of our AI community initiatives and also look after our operations in terms of optimizing the operations as well. And a BCom graduate, she has been working with multiple tech startups including Exotel, then Recruiterbox, Zapier, and Postman, working across customer success and of late into product support and the leadership aspects of it. Welcome once again to the podcast, Nivedha, and please feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. This is actually my first time doing a podcast, so it's exciting by itself, but also this topic in specific, about writing and, creating a personal brand, that's an exciting topic for me. So a little bit about me. I am a BCom graduated in 2013. Started my career with a recruiting role at a hedge fund called DE Shaw, and quickly figured that one of my interests is to work with smaller teams on nimble, fast growing products. So which is when I started exploring startups back in 2014, 2015. It was still not very popular concept to work with startups. But I wanted to take that risk and see what it would feel like, and I immediately fell in love with it. So I started my career in Exotel doing sales. Then I moved on to support, and ever since I've done a bunch of support roles across various companies. So Exotel, Recruiterbox, Zapier is where I spent a large amount of my career. So about 5 years I was at Zapier, and then finally at Postman before I joined SaaSBoomi to work on strategy and operations. So primarily to help our team, have better internal tooling, communication, and so on.
Yeah, so you have close to 4,000 followers, right?
Yeah.
In LinkedIn, and you started in 2013 itself with the LinkedIn. Or
Yeah, I think I created my LinkedIn profile in 2012, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, 1 year before I graduated.
And so is it the first time that you are going viral, or this is just the first time that we happen to notice it?
No, this is the first time I went viral. So I've been very focusedly writing, I'd say, for the last 8 months.
Okay.
So yeah, this was the first time.
So how was the whole thing? Like, were you expecting it? Were you expecting that this will do maybe comparatively better compared to your previous post? Or I mean, can you give us a walkthrough from 48 hours before to 48 hours after, or maybe like 1 week after? Yeah.
I have been following a lot of, LinkedIn recruiter influencers, to say so. And
Okay.
a lot of times I've noticed that they, have been encouraging candidates to tailor their resumes for the jobs that they're applying to, because it just gives them a better shot at it. And I've myself not been in the job market, for a while now, but I could empathize with how difficult that must be, especially given, how many layoffs have happened over the last year. And I come across so many posts every day on LinkedIn where people have been like, "Hey, I haven't found a job for the last 4 months, 6 months, a year." And I really wanted to find some way for people to be able to do this resume tailoring a bit faster. And that's when, I've been using ChatGPT ever since it came out, and I was like, hey, there has to be a way for this to happen. So
Yeah.
the day I wrote the post, that afternoon I sat down, started writing a prompt, and I'd say it took me about 10 minutes. I took my husband's help. He's a ML engineer, so I was like, hey, help me out with the fine tuning of the prompt, and he did that. And when I saw the output, I was quite shocked. I was like, this is, I'm not sure if people know this because I go on LinkedIn quite a bit. I've seen a lot of ChatGPT hacks, but this is not something that I've seen. So,
Okay.
to the question of whether I knew if it would be viral, in a way, yes, because I knew that right now a lot of the content that's being consumed is geared towards job seekers. So I think there's been a wave of recruitment or recruiting leaders becoming influencers on LinkedIn over the last year, and I think that's a trend that we're seeing. That's over going aside from the layoffs that's been happening. So there's a lot more job seekers on the market right now. So I knew in a way that this would go viral, and I
Okay.
did do a very intentional effort of tagging one of the recruiting leaders. So Bonnie Dilber, who's a recruiting leader at Zapier. I've known them for a while now, so I made sure that I tagged them there. And if it was something that Bonnie felt like was an important piece of information that her network needs to know, I knew that she would either comment or like the post.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's what I was banking on. So this was the first time I was writing a post where I knew that it could have a very high potential of catching on.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share this screen
Hmm.
and give this post. So this is the post, right? Okay, so you are like you were tagging Bonnie because you wanted that engagement to happen,
Yeah.
and okay, right. Yeah, and so when did you post this? Like in the afternoon, in the second half?
So I wrote the prompt in the afternoon,
Okay.
and then I did the post late at night. I'd say
Okay.
maybe around 9 p.m. because I also
9
know
p.m.
that's when most of the US folks come online.
So were your audience, is it why the audience is US? Because the product that you're working related to this, or?
Yeah, it is actually related to this, and I'd say one of the biggest outcomes from this post was to work on something that would, help job seekers even more, and
Okay.
help them do not just resume building, but also other factors regarding their job search.
Okay, great. So 9 o'clock you hit the button, yeah, post, and then what happened? What happened in the next 15 minutes, 1 hour, and let's say 24 hours?
Yeah, so for the first 15 minutes, I think I got like maybe a few likes.
Yeah.
And then I got a comment from Bonnie on the post.
Okay.
And I'd say over the next 2 hours, the
Mhm.
numbers just kept going up and up.
Okay.
And the trend sort of continued for, I'd say, about 4 to 5 days after that.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah. So the entire post was like very lively for close to a week.
Yeah, it was quite engaging for a week at least.
Okay, okay, okay. What was some of the striking, what do you call, responses, or something which you were not expecting, or something which was like very delightful?
I think the most delightful comments that I received, and this was multiple people posting the same thing, was that this was the first time that they saw a chat GPT hack that was actually going to help them, in a very tangible manner. And so when I think that was a similar sentiment that I had when I saw the output from ChatGPT. It kind of blew my mind, and I
Okay.
think I saw the same kind of reactions from a bunch of other people. I got plenty connection requests where people specifically called out how grateful they were that they found this hack that and that I shared it. So that was such a great moment because it is something that people are struggling with, getting jobs in this market. So I was really happy that I was able to make that difference.
To see 279 people also reposted that. That is that's also pretty amazing, right? It's like close to 10 percentage of the entire engagement that you got.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's pretty amazing. And how many connection requests you got roughly?
Oh, it was plenty. I'd say upwards of 300, 400.
Okay.
And I I think my followers also went up by over 1,000. I think the biggest outcome really was for me to have identified an area that I've been very passionate about. I've always done pro bono coaching, career counseling for people either looking to move into tech because I know how daunting it can be, especially if you're coming from a non-tech background. So I think I finally found something that I can, passionately work towards, actually productizing something that can be used
Okay.
by, lots of people. And I think that was the biggest outcome for me.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And so now that this happened, like what's your before and after experience of let's say how people consider Nivedha? Is there any difference, or what is that difference? So one is with respect to you, and second is with respect to your own post, right? Do you see any difference in terms of engagement, or how people react?
So yeah, to be very honest, it was very overwhelming. I expected something to happen just because of the nature of the post. At the same time, I didn't expect for it to go as wide as it did. So it was quite overwhelming initially. And I think I've always, at least at this point in my life, I am not looking to be a content influencer. So that was something that I really had to wrap my head around. A lot of people reached out saying, "Hey, like you've got to like ride this wave. You have to like start like churning out content," and that wasn't in my plans. And I don't think it's going to be in my plans in the future, at least in the near future. So that was a bit hard to grapple because I really had to go back to my roots and think about why it is that I write. And why I write is because I, like writing. And I
Yeah.
also am someone who has, opinions, and I want it to be as transparent rather than it being geared towards getting more followers and getting more engagement. I've seen some content influencers do it really well where they are still very true to their word and the engagement happens organically. I think that's what I believe in. So if one day that happens, that's great. But I'm definitely not a fan of writing content that's just going to grab eyes and attention. So that was the initial week or so was a bit hard for me in that sense that I really had to dig deeper into myself and understand what it is that I was going after.
How were you like doing the posts before this? Like, let's say in a month. So how often you post, and what was your? Is it like, okay, you get some idea about something that you want to write about, you write about it, or was it like a bit more like planned in the sense that, hey, okay, this week I'm going to write about this? How was your frequency?
Yeah, so I started, so I think in December 2022, I decided that I wanted to start sharing my learnings, being in the startup world or leadership and CX. So
Yeah.
that was the commitment that I made to myself that I would write more often. I did not think as much about, creating like a content pipeline or a bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
So how I would normally come up with ideas is something would have happened at work that week, and that would have sparked a certain set of opinions or situations in my head that I would quickly jot down on my notes app, and then I would go ahead and refine it that evening or a couple of days later. So typically, my goal was to post, 2 to 3 times, 2 times a week at least. And I think so far, more or less, I've kept that up. So yeah, otherwise there wasn't really like too much planning, but I would do like some checks with ChatGPT on like my tone because sometimes I'm writing it with a lot of emotion, and I want to make sure that it doesn't come across negatively, but it's still.
So were these also, I mean, did you have any target audience in mind when you are writing this, or is it more like, okay, this occurred to me, let me share this experience as if, I'm just blogging, right? Just for, the sharing say irrespective of who the target audience is. So this target audience in it could be, see, one could be your potential customers, right? Or as you was mentioning, okay, maybe the your colleagues in general, right? Or some you mentioned your interest in mentoring some of the upcoming professionals, right? So it could be them. So did you have an audience in mind, or were you writing more like, okay, let me share my experience and we'll
Yeah.
figure the audience part later, or not worry about the audience at all?
Yeah, I wasn't really worried about the audience. There were certain topics that I've always been interested in talking about. So I thought about the topics that I like talking about, with people in my, field offline.
Yeah.
So I took those topics that I like offline, into the online space. So
Mm-hmm.
typically, remote work has been something that I really enjoy talking about. During the pandemic, I had consulted with some of quite a big startups in India who wanted to figure this out, and being part of Zapier, that's been doing like 100% remote right from the beginning. And I was one of the very few people in India at that point who's already been working remotely. So
Okay.
that was again looking at what have people traditionally reached out to me for. So one was
Mm-hmm.
remote work. I've gotten a bunch of people reach out to me for, hey, how do I show my value at work? So that sort of career counseling. There have
Mm-hmm.
been people who reached out to me about wanting to move into tech, and they've been, working in some other types of fields previously. So I was just looking at my real life interactions and what really, pumped me when I had those conversations, and then took those topics. So sometimes I would still sit and think about, okay, if this was a situation, what would I write about?
Mm-hmm.
So there was some bit of planning as well, but most often it was something that would have happened at work or some conversation I would write a post about that.
Yeah, so this is great, Niveda. So we had a very good overview in terms of how it went viral, and how you were doing LinkedIn in the last 8 months. And so based on this experience and everything, is there any change in your LinkedIn plan going forward?
Not as of now, Daniel,
Mhm.
because I really enjoyed having my own voice and finding that voice.
Okay.
And I think I want to continue writing things that people that I think people should know about. And
Okay.
if engagement happens organically, that's great.
Okay.
Uh, at the same time, I'm still not sure if I go after engagement, what will happen to my voice, and if it will continue being authentic. So that's something I'll continue to figure out. I'm not
Okay.
saying that it'll be a bad thing for me to write for engagement, but
Mhm.
I think I'm still figuring out like how to retain my own voice while
Got
I
it.
also share like interesting content for my
Okay,
network.
okay. Yeah. So more like voice first, engagement second, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so based on all your experience in LinkedIn so far, what are some of the tricks that you would give to someone who is trying to start their career, or someone who is like just starting out on their LinkedIn?
Good question. So if I just think about how I started writing on LinkedIn, I would say don't focus on perfection. I think all of
Mm-hmm.
us have a certain tendency to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would only check for like tone and grammar,
Mm-hmm.
but to just start writing, I think that's where I started figuring out my voice. So every 5 posts or so, I would go back and read the style in which I'd written. What were some of the posts that people like? Sometimes people would DM me saying, "Hey, I really enjoy what you write. This particular thing resonated. Would you be open to talk?" So to look at like what were those posts that really garnered that attention, and to continue building on top of that. But the one thing that really helped me break the ice was to not try and bring some level of perfection to the post, because, like, who's to say what a perfect post looks like? So I'd
Yeah.
say everyone today needs a personal brand. Whether you're looking to start your own company or whether you're looking for a job, people are now going beyond what's on your main LinkedIn profile, but and to actually look at what kind of posts are you reposting. For example, you don't even have to write your own post to start with. Like repost something with a little bit of your own words to go with it. That's a great start. So you don't have to sit and think about what you want to write about. And most often, what you're talking about in offline conversations, I'd say notice that and try to bring that into an online format.
And one side question here. So, have you been using any images or carousels or any multimedia along with your posts, or so far it has been mainly text post itself, and that have been that's doing pretty good.
Yeah, so far it's just been text. I think I'm definitely more of a writer, but I've been playing around with Canva quite a bit recently for another thing that I'm doing on Instagram. So I am quite enjoying that. So maybe I'll look at bringing that kind of short form content into LinkedIn. But for now, I think my long form is something that I really enjoy doing.
Great. So yeah, so this is very insightful, Nivedha, and I'm sure that our audience will be like taking some like inputs from this and tuning up their game. Now before we wrap up, right? So one thing we would like to know is more about what you do and what you're building and more of your expertise and how you can be of helpful to your the community as well, right? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say anything around asynchronous communication is something that I've worked on quite a lot. I've had a lot of help and support from my colleagues at Zapier to be an effective communicator in writing. And it's gotten me like really cool opportunities just because of that. Although being in APAC, and most of the business happening in North America, I still got opportunities that most of us wouldn't have expected to have seen. So that's something that I can definitely help with. I think
Yeah.
writing is a very powerful tool, in my opinion. So that's one.
Yeah, so just take clarifications here for the benefit
Sure.
of the audience. So, what is async communication?
Yeah, great question. So, what we're doing right now is synchronous communication, right? Like we're going back and forth in a flow.
Yeah.
Async is literally the opposite of it. So, when you're using a tool like Slack or you're using a tool like Jira, where you're tracking your tasks and collaborating with your team, so anything that's text based tooling that you're using, I would say that's asynchronous communication because the expectation is that you're not going to get a response immediately. So that's how I define asynchronous communication.
Okay, okay. So you have pretty good experience there, and if someone would like to like make their async comms in their organization better, they can reach out to you, right? And anything else?
So the other part I would say is customer experience in general. So again, having worked with several startups that have really honed the customer facing, the importance of customer facing communication. I think that's something that I've really like worked on over the years.
Yeah.
A lot of times there are certain areas where we miss out on crucial insights from customers, and instead we might rely on more data where we also have to like include customer conversations. So today there's tons of AI products that have really started building for the CX teams, and the reason is because they've figured that hey, data only tells us part of the story. So that's another area where I can definitely add value.
Like who can reach out to you for some career advice or?
I would say typically anyone who is entering the market as a fresh graduate, anyone who is looking to move from an individual contributor role to a leadership role, or anyone who is looking to move from one some field into the tech field specifically. So
Right.
these are three types of people I'll be able to help with.
And now, so there are three like quick questions for you. One is, see, other than LinkedIn, what are some of the other tools that gives you leverage that you're using?
Grammarly for sure. I have the Grammarly app installed on my Mac. So it works on pretty much every tool. So there is nothing that I write without help of Grammarly. So a lot of times I'm making typos. So I would say my writing is pretty much 100% typo free.
Okay.
And so that's one. Second is ChatGPT. I use it quite extensively to do checks on my tone. So sometimes I might have written something with some sort of emotion and I can feel it. And I want to make sure that it's coming out with an empathetic tone. So I do those tone variations with ChatGPT. Grammarly does that, but you have to be on the premium plan for that. So I primarily use, mostly free tools. Third one is
Yeah.
Coda. I use Coda very extensively. So anything that I'm working on, I always document. I'm quite crazy about documentation. So
Okay.
any small little idea that I have, I'll first start writing about it. I'll create like very clear to-do lists. So I've tried to-do apps. None of them personally for me work because there is a certain way that all of us have in how we track our to-do list. So I've built out my own style of to-do list. So I use that quite extensively. So yeah, Grammarly, ChatGPT, Coda, or any tool like Notion for documenting your work.
So Grammarly, ChatGPT, and Coda on the tools, and any book or content that you're consuming.
So on LinkedIn, I would say I really like Bonnie Dilber's content. I like reading Shreyas Doshi, who writes a lot about product, manager stuff. I also read the Pragmatic Engineer. I think it's one of the best engineering blogs I've ever come across. So highly recommended for anyone who's on the engineering side. Yeah, I'm not a big like non-fiction book reader, so that's not something that I've done a lot. I think the last book I read was Atomic Habits, and I didn't really like it. So
Okay.
I stay quite away from like self-help books. Oh, the other one that I really like is Paul Graham. I think anyone who's in the tech field has to read Paul Graham's blog. He's been writing for like I don't know, a couple of decades now. So
Yeah.
he's someone that I always read.
Great. Awesome. So, Nivedha, so that's the podcast for us. And any concluding, thoughts or, message that you'd like to convey to the, our viewers?
I guess the only thing that comes to mind is write a lot, keep refining your writing. I think in today's world, everything has some text based, interaction that we're doing. So my advice to early grads has always been, even if it's a WhatsApp message to your friend, don't use short form words, but write like full words. So you start getting used to being grammatically sound. It creates an impression to the people that you're interacting with in ways that you cannot imagine. So even the smallest thing that you do in refining your writing will go a very, very long way.
Awesome. So, thanks so much, Nivedha, for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and look forward to host you in much more detailed episode sometime in the future soon. Yeah.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah.